In 1536, King Henry VIII of England launched one of the most audacious land grabs in history. He dissolved the monasteries of England, confiscating their lands, treasures, and wealth. Over 800 monasteries were destroyed. Their gold and silver were melted down. Their lands were sold to the king's loyal supporters. The dissolution of the monasteries was a crime, a political revolution, and one of the greatest transfers of wealth in English history. This is the story of how one king's greed and ambition reshaped a nation. For centuries, the monasteries of England had been the heart of the nation's religious and cultural life. There were more than 800 of them, and they held vast lands, immense wealth, and immense power. They had been built by kings, nobles, and commoners who sought to guarantee their place in heaven. They were centers of learning, charity, and prayer. But Henry VIII was not a man who shared power. He was arrogant, ambitious, and desperate for a male heir. He had already broken with the Pope, establishing himself as the head of the Church of England so he could divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry Anne Boleyn. But the monasteries still owed their allegiance to the Pope. They were a threat to Henry's new church. Henry appointed Thomas Cromwell as his chief minister. Cromwell was a brilliant administrator and a ruthless pragmatist. He had a plan to destroy the monasteries and transfer their wealth to the crown. The first step was to discredit them. Cromwell sent his inspectors to visit every monastery in the country. They were looking for evidence of corruption, fraud, and moral decay. What they found was predictable. The inspectors reported that the monasteries were corrupt, lazy, and immoral. They reported that monks were indulging in gluttony, that nuns were breaking their vows, and that the monasteries were wasting their wealth on frivolous pursuits. The reports were exaggerated, but they provided the justification Henry needed. Parliament passed the Acts of Suppression, dissolving the monasteries and confiscating their lands. The closure of the monasteries was brutal. The monks were evicted, their homes were destroyed, and their lands were confiscated. The treasures of the monasteries were melted down, and the libraries were destroyed. Thousands of monks and nuns were forced out of their homes and into the world. The community support systems that the monasteries had provided were gone. The treasures of the monasteries were immense. They included gold and silver chalices, jeweled crosses, and magnificent tapestries. All of it was taken to the royal treasury. The gold and silver were melted down and made into coins. The jewels were sold or repurposed. The treasures that had been accumulated over centuries were gone. The lands of the monasteries were sold to Henry's loyal supporters. This redistribution of wealth created a new aristocracy, loyal to the king. The nobles who bought the land became the richest and most powerful men in England. They had a stake in the success of the new church. They would ensure that England never returned to Catholicism. Today, the ruins of the monasteries are a reminder of the destruction that took place. The buildings are crumbling, and the lands are gone. The treasures that were once there are gone forever. The dissolution of the monasteries was a crime, but it was also a political necessity. The monasteries had outlived their usefulness, and Henry needed their wealth. But here is the question that remains: was the dissolution justified? The monasteries were corrupt, but they were also centers of charity and learning. The dissolution was a crime, but it was also a revolution. The dissolution of the monasteries is a reminder that power and greed can destroy the institutions that have defined a civilization for centuries.